Chelsea gaffer Xabi Alonso is determined to bring back his Bayer Leverkusen general Granit Xhaka to the club, but Sunderland are not letting him go without a fight. Cesc Fabregas's Como have officially sent a bid for Trevoh Chalobah, but it is below the valuation that we want for our academy centre-back. The Maxence Lacroix conversations are being had quietly in the background, but by the sounds of it, he's very keen to join the club. Everton have supposedly offered a contract to Liam Delap, so could we see the end of the 2-goal striker? And reports also indicate that Chelsea might be interested in bringing back a player that we sold quite recently in the form of Cesare Casadei. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And it's transfer season, man. It's officially started, right? It took a little while, didn't it? The news was quiet for a while, but then bang, Palestra. Then obviously we started hearing about Lacroix. Now we're hearing about Granit Xhaka. Starting to hear about players that we're looking to sell. So let's get into all of today's news. Fabrizio Romano posted this after last night's bombshell that Chelsea are in for Granit Xhaka. The agreement between Chelsea and Granit Xhaka on personal terms is guaranteed. Xhaka is driving the move personally as he wants CFC, wants to reunite with Xabi Alonso and wants to live in London. Deal depends on the clubs. So Granit Xhaka, super keen for the move essentially, and I do find this interesting as well because Sunderland finished above us last season at the end of the day. I think they might even have got some form of European football. I'd need to check the table again to make sure that it was also crazy on the final days. But he's obviously really loved there by the fans as well. But the opportunity to A, move back to London and B, work under the best manager that he's obviously had in his career is one that's proving very tantalising for him. So this is one of those situations, isn't it? Now, I wouldn't want to see this get ugly, essentially. I don't like it where I didn't really like the Enzo Fernandez thing when he forced his way out of Benfica to come to Chelsea and kind of really made that move happen. I hope that we can just agree a reasonable deal for Granit Xhaka to come to the club. Xabi Alonso wants him, Chelsea obviously want him, and Granit Xhaka really wants the move, but Sunderland are not so keen as of yet. So Fabrizio Romano posted this: Sunderland were quite surprised. They were not expecting Granit Xhaka to inform them that he wanted to leave. Chelsea are playing down, paying 25 to 35 mil due to his age. Now it's on club to club, as on the player side, he's ready to accept any condition. This is where we start to see a little bit more of classic Blueco, right? Although I don't necessarily expect it to go the same way that it did with Mike Maignan. Xabi Alonso clearly really wants Granit Xhaka in. We're going to get into some reasons for it in a while because yes, he's an old player at the end of the day, but one of the big things that we've been hearing about since Xabi Alonso came in is mentality monsters. He wants to buy and create mentality monsters, and where better to start with his most trusted general in the Bayer Leverkusen invincible season. Now, Xabi Alonso, it's not like he tried to bring him to Real Madrid. It's not like wherever Xabi Alonso goes, like Brendan Rodgers and Kolo Touré. Do you know what I mean? It's not the same kind of thing as that. But at the same time, we have a very young squad and we are bereft of strong leadership across the group in general. The closest we've kind of had to that really is obviously Levi Colwill, who was out for the majority of last season. Reece James, who has grown into a leadership role, but it's not necessarily natural for him, and obviously is experiencing injury issues himself, and to a larger extent, obviously, vice-captain Enzo Fernandez, who we're probably expecting to see go out the door, and in a lead-by-example kind of way, Marco Correa as well. Obviously, for the majority of his time at Chelsea, he led by example. So we are really bereft of leaders at the moment, and we've got a lot of young players who we don't necessarily need to dump the leadership role on them if it isn't natural for these guys. So what, unfortunately, Blueco haven't been doing in buying all of the players that we've been buying is looking at more of the intangibles, right? The personality, the leadership, the professionalism. We've kind of been buying players like we're playing Football Manager and we're just like, his stats are really good, therefore it'll work. Obviously, sports in general, but football in particular, is a lot more nuanced than that, and the character's so important. The thing with Granit Xhaka is he is older, but he is obviously a very skilled player and obviously has that leadership quality and that kind of mentality that Xabi Alonso wants around the squad as well. So 25 to 35 mil. Look, at this point, it's just one of those, isn't it? Like, this isn't even necessarily completely about what Granit Xhaka does on the pitch, although it will be. Do you know what I mean? I do imagine that he would add to the squad and already knows the system that Xabi wants to play, but if that 25 to 35 mil isn't just about how many goals he scores, how many key passes he makes, how many chances he creates, it's a lot about how he can help Xabi Alonso. He's kind of like an auxiliary manager on the pitch, right? Which is something we're going to get into in a minute. So Chelsea Dodgers posted this vis-a-vis the valuation of Granit Xhaka. Chelsea's valuation of Granit Xhaka is much lower than the 25 mil figure doing the rounds. That's because he turns 34 years old this year and he's only got 2 years left on his contract. So the thing about this, right, is it's not necessarily about the player's book value at the end of the day. The qualities that Xabi Alonso will want from Granit Xhaka are largely intangible, as I was just talking about with the leadership and stuff. And from Sunderland's point of view, which is the thing we have to take into consideration here as well, as far as book value goes, being 34 years old, only having 2 years left on his deal, or nearly 34, and only having 2 years left on his deal, his book value probably isn't going to be super high. But what he brings to that team is worth a lot more than 25 to 35 mil. It's not, you can't just replace this kind of player at the end of the day. And we know that because we haven't been able to for a really long time since, when was the last time we had a really, really strong leader at the club? Who was your favourite Chelsea leader in the last decade? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, Blueco will be looking at this, the sporting directors and the money people, and be like, I'm not paying 30 mil for a 34-year-old. That's absolutely wild. But hopefully Xabi Alonso behind the scenes is really driving this, because I back it because Xabi wants it. If we still had Liam Rosenior or Enzo Maresca and he was like, I want Granit Xhaka, I'd be a bit more like, oh, I'm not sure about that. I don't necessarily see it. And I would probably, think more about the player profile and the age and stuff. But the real big difference here is the partnership of Xabi Alonso and Granit Xhaka, what they won together. And it is clearly evident how much Xabi Alonso values Granit Xhaka's intangible qualities as well as his ability on the pitch, despite his age. So Pice posted this via Fabrizio Romano, and it kind of just encapsulates a little bit of what I've been talking about already. For Alonso, Xhaka at Leverkusen was the extra manager on the pitch. That is kind of exactly what we need, if I'm completely honest. We need someone that we conceded lots of late goals, for instance, and mentality has been such an issue at the club since Blueco took over, because we cleaned house top to bottom, from the playing staff to the sporting directors, a lot of the coaches, everyone kind of got kicked out and loads of new people got brought in. As far as the playing staff goes, what we've been missing is leadership. Like I say, I've talked about it a little bit already. But I think this is a really, really important kind of way of looking at what Xabi Alonso sees in Granit Xhaka. So the profile of the player, for instance, if we're just talking about the profile of the player I would want to get for that position is Adam Wharton. We know as far as the technical profile of the player goes, what Xabi Alonso is looking for in his team is a deep-lying distributor. And that is what Granit Xhaka's role was at Bayer Leverkusen. And like I say, if it was just that, if we were just talking about the player profile, I'd be like, don't waste any money on Granit Xhaka. Go out and get Adam Wharton, because excellent at that role in particular, and also really young, so has got, can grow into the team kind of thing. You don't get a Granit Xhaka and have him for more than a couple of years at the end of the day. It's unlikely anyway. But there's just another thing as well, isn't it? Like Tosin Adarabioyo was our oldest player in the squad last season. We don't have a single 30-year-old in the team, and unfortunately, it just looks like you can't build teams like that. Like, I loved the idea initially when Blueco came in of like building a team based around youth, but even for that, it's like having 0 really experienced players in the team was just absolutely wild. And what Xabi Alonso wants from Granit Xhaka is someone who absolutely believes in what he's got to say and can delineate it and get it out to the rest of the guys in the squad, make sure everyone's staying in line. Do I think he's going to play every single game? Honestly, I couldn't say. It's the thing to bear in mind is we don't have European football, so we will be playing less games, albeit only 8 less games, 8 to 10, like something like that, less games next season. So in terms of the actual games, it's not actually that much. But at the same time, there will be less games and we do need to trim the squad down. So I'm not 100% sure if Granit Xhaka would get every single game. Like I say, if we go in for an Adam Wharton, or if there's faith given in Romeo Lavia, who always is currently the only player we've got who fits that deep-lying distributor kind of role, then I'm not sure about the playing time. But you can bet your bottom dollar that having a player like Granit Xhaka around would be really, really useful for the squad, right? Like, I know, we're talking about keeping Tosin Adarabioyo because of the experience, the age, and the dressing room kind of vibes and stuff. But he's not a leader, is he? He's not a leader. He's just an experienced head who it's good to have, because otherwise we're literally throwing still kids into the Premier League and be the best team in the world. And it's just so difficult. It's so difficult. If you look at a lot of the best teams that have been filled with youth over the years, there's always a couple of experienced heads around, because leadership is so important. So for Xabi Alonso to see Granit Xhaka as an extra manager on the pitch, it just says that it is like a kind of almost in addition to the coaching staff in a way, but someone there on the pitch who you can trust to make sure that the message is going the right way. And if people aren't tracking back like they're supposed to, or if people are showboating too much, or there's a lot of like different situations where Granit Xhaka could essentially give the players a clip round the ear and make sure that everyone's staying in line, but also just being completely committed to the manager's philosophy and ideas. So guys, that's it about Granit Xhaka for today. But if you are enjoying today's episode of the Stamford Sync, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, so we're going to move on from Granit Xhaka and we're going to talk a little bit more about Trevoh Chalobah, and that does seem to be heating up as well. Transfer News Live posted this via Sky Sport. Como have submitted an improved €27 million package to Chelsea for Trevoh Chalobah. The Serie A side have offered €25 million plus €2 million bonuses as they look to strengthen Cesc Fabregas's defence. Chelsea have rejected the proposal and are holding out for €30 million plus a further €5 million in bonuses before allowing Chalobah to leave. So weirdly, this is actually kind of a good thing, right? And look, I expect to see Trevoh Chalobah go, as we're going to get into in a minute. Como are not the only club that are interested in him. They're just, as of right now, the only ones that are actually putting in a move for him. It makes sense to sell Trevoh Chalobah from a squad building point of view because, and look, I've talked about this until the cows come home, so I'll keep it brief. But as much as I would love to keep Trevoh Chalobah around as a backup, and I absolutely would, if he's not up for that, then it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It's like if Trevoh Chalobah doesn't want to stick around to play behind a Maxence Lacroix and get a significant amount less games in this season, then the best thing for him is to move on as well. The good thing about it, though, is we're not just going to sell him for any price. So I've seen some conflicting reports, some to say it's €30 million, like this one, but also I've seen £30 million. £30 million for Trevoh Chalobah is 30 mil in the bank straight away. That is probably in and around what you'd get for selling the likes of Badiashile, Fofana and Disasi combined, because these players' stocks have dropped significantly. So the chances are, clearing those guys off of our books is going to free up squad cost ratio and wages, but it's not going to net us a huge amount of money in the bank. Selling a Trevoh Chalobah, unfortunately, will get us money in the bank, but also holding on to him is pointless if he's not going to want to be here to be behind the likes of Maxence Lacroix, right? I did a big deep dive on Maxence Lacroix and Trevoh Chalobah the other day, like a TLDW, too long didn't watch, about that. Is essentially Trevoh Chalobah, it was the passing centre back for us last season, and now we've got Levi Colwill coming back into the team. Trevoh Chalobah's not necessarily going to be needed for that. Maxence Lacroix is a defender, first defender, and really good at it, and a lot better than everyone else we've got in the squad already. So look, I think it all just makes sense, and I love Trev. Obviously, he was an academy boy. He's fought his way back into the team. His story has been really interesting. But if Como can ramp up the rest of the money, even if it is like a €30 million, do you know what I mean? It's the best for them, it's the best for us at the moment, and it's probably the best for him. Fabrizio Romano also posted this. Como official bid for Trevoh Chalobah was sent days ago, as revealed, and Chelsea have already indicated a higher price to sell the centre-back. 25 mil won't be enough, as CFC are aware of more clubs keen, including Inter, attentive and monitoring Chalobah. So the interesting thing about this is the Inter angle, right? Because are they bitter about us for swooping in for Marco Palestra? If they are indeed interested in coming in for Trevoh Chalobah, then maybe not. I would rather sell him to Como because, albeit tersely, it still feels like with Cesc Fabregas at the helm, there's a connection there. Also, Cesc Fabregas plays possession-based football. Evidently, from the comparison that I did yesterday, Trevoh Chalobah is a really good passer and will probably do quite well in the Italian league that's a little bit less physical, a little bit less aggressive, and his passing abilities, for instance, would be able to shine a little bit more. So I'd really like Trevoh Chalobah to go to Como if he leaves. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be screwing if he goes to Inter. I have heard about Juventus being interested in him as well. Well, the one thing we haven't found out about yet is supposedly there are other clubs in the Premier League that are interested in him. You'd have to think one of those is probably Crystal Palace. Whether Trev would want to go back to Crystal Palace or not, whether he's ready for a new step in his career that maybe involves going abroad, who knows. But at the end of the day, I hope Como do. Now, it's difficult for Como as well because Real Madrid just forced them to spend €60 million on Nico Paz, which essentially amounts to €50 million because they got €10 million for selling him back to Real Madrid in the first place. But Como are already down $50 million for buying a player that was already in their squad. So that's a really difficult thing for them, right? Because yes, they've got into the Champions League, but at the same time, you have to build these things slowly over time. It doesn't always work for teams that get promoted and then get into the Champions League and then spend all of this money like it's difficult. Because if it doesn't pay off and they drop out of the Champions League next season, then all of a sudden things get difficult again and they've got to start looking at selling players. And you can bet your bottom dollar after spending $60 million on Nico Paz, if Como don't kick on next season, they'll be looking at selling him again at the end of the season. But if he carries on doing well, then that could be for crazy money, couldn't it? So for Como's situation in particular, it's difficult to just, that would then amount to, if they spend 30 mil, then they've spent 90 mil, up to 95 million with the add-ons on 2 players at the beginning of the window, and their budget is not going to be so much bigger than that. So if they've got other places they want to address in the squad, it's going to start to get difficult. So I hope some sort of middle ground can be found. Like, at the end of the day, if Cesc Fabregas sees Trevoh Chalobah as the guy, hopefully they come up with the money. But if they don't, the chances are someone from the UK or another team from Italy is going to swoop in for him. Let me know what you think about the Trevoh Chalobah situation in the comments. Right, so next up, we're going to talk about 3 other players. We'll start with Maxence Lacroix. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via Ben Jacobs. Regarding Maxence Lacroix, it is moving club to club, and I would not be surprised if a formal bid were incoming. Palace would love to keep him, but Lacroix is open to joining Chelsea. They're going through a change-up as well, and they've just brought a new manager in. Obviously, despite them winning trophies over the last few seasons, they did that with a really specific manager. And some of these players, the likes of Lacroix, potentially Adam Wharton, might be, feeling, as apparently Lacroix is, okay, cool, it's time to move on. Lacroix is at kind of the perfect time to make the step up in his career now, because he's 26 years old. He's been really, really good for Crystal Palace, but it does just feel like it's kind of time for him to move on. So one other thing I've seen about Lacroix is supposedly Crystal Palace are interested in getting in and around the same sort of money for Lacroix that Tottenham paid for Jan-Paul van Hecke, which was, I think, 52 million. I'm not sure how many add-ons there were. Honestly, 50 million is just, for a solid player that comes in and upgrades your first team at the moment, is kind of just a good amount, isn't it, at the end of the day? We've got a lot of players to sell, albeit we're not going to make a huge amount of profit on them. Lacroix is necessary, and look, there's talks about Jacobo Ramon and stuff, but buying a Lacroix, what other Premier League centre-back that's right-footed as well? Because I really like the look of Murillo, but he signed a new deal last year, so he's going to be spenny if we do go in for him. And we're not necessarily going to need him if Levi Cole was able to stay fit for a season. But with Lacroix, he's a right-sided centre-back, which is absolutely what we need. He's Premier League experienced. He's got winning credentials now. He's won a few trophies with Crystal Palace, which is unbelievable, by the way. Technically 3 trophies in the last 2 seasons is phenomenal. And it just feels like the right upgrade to all of the players that we've got. And like I say, if anything, the other players that we were linked to have both gone to Tottenham, because Senesi went to Tottenham on a free. Jan-Paul van Hecke gone to Tottenham for 50 mil. Lacroix was kind of the other player that was being mentioned in and around a few months ago, before Xabi Alonso came in, before the window even opened. Lacroix was the player I really liked, Van Hecke, for instance, but upon us targeting Lacroix, actually looking into it now, I can see that what we're looking for is a first defender, and in particular Van Hecke, really good passer, but not quite as astute defensively as Maxence Lacroix. So, Maxence Lacroix, for me, at the moment, without knowing every single Premier League centre-back, seems like the obvious choice to go for. He wants to move. It sounds like it's happening. A bid is incoming, potentially. I don't think we'll try and undersell them either, because I've mentioned this before. We've got a good relationship with Crystal Palace. We've sent and loaned and sold lots of players to them over the years, and we haven't bought a huge amount from them either, to be completely honest. So hopefully there is a deal to be done here, and we still need to wait and see what's going to happen with the Adam Wharton deal as well, right? And if we're even going to go in for it, I imagine the Granit Xhaka thing's going to come first, but we'll have to wait and see. Right, next up, we're going to talk about Liam Delap. Transfer News Alive posted this via Football Insider. Everton have offered Liam Delap a contract as they step up their pursuit of the Chelsea striker. The Toffees are working through intermediaries to agree personal terms with Chelsea, prepared to sanction a permanent transfer this summer. Everton are currently leading the race for the 23-year-old after his difficult debut season at Stamford Bridge. So it's just Keane and Dewsbury Hall waiting to happen again, really, isn't it? Liam Delap was just not the level for Chelsea, and it wasn't for lack of minutes. That's the thing. We can't talk about, he wasn't given the right opportunity. He played under 2 different managers. He got 41 appearances last season. He only managed 2 goals and a bucket full of assists. I remember he got 3 assists in one of the FA Cup games against Hull. But we just don't play a style that suits him, and we don't have players around him to give him a good enough service. Now, to be honest, that could change, because if we're looking at getting in the likes of Granit Xhaka or an Adam Wharton, then all of a sudden maybe a striker like Liam Delap becomes a little bit more of an option, because we'll have a bit more creativity coming out of our midfield, which is what we haven't necessarily had, because Caicedo was your ball winner and Enzo Fernandez is always bombing on forward to score goals. And the likes of Andre Santos, Dario Asugo, maybe Romeo Lavia, but he's just never been fit, has he? The other guys we've got in our midfield aren't really conducive to excellent creative midfield play. So maybe there's something to be said that if we do get the midfield targets we want, Liam Delap potentially becomes a bit more of an option, because we're getting more facilitation from our midfield, and obviously we're looking at wing-backs. The likes of Marco Palestra can put a cross in, for instance, which is something we haven't had a lot of, and maybe that does play a little bit more to Liam Delap's strengths. But at this moment in time, if the money is 40 mil, isn't it? The amount of money we've seen is 40 million pounds. If Everton come in with a 35 plus 5 for Liam Delap, he just gets sold, I think, genuinely. It's difficult, isn't it? Because even though we're in this first month of the transfer window, because the World Cup's going on, Xabi Alonso doesn't start work for another couple of days yet. He'll be able, to be fair, in a few days, Xabi Alonso will start to be able to assess Liam Delap because he's not at the World Cup. So I'll take that one completely back. So maybe we're going to find out about Liam Delap in the next week or so, because the truth is, the window has felt slower because Xabi Alonso hasn't started working with the team yet. But in 3 days' time, counting from today, Xabi Alonso is actually going to start assessing the players in person, and that's maybe when we're going to see the likes of... Because the thing is as well, a lot of guys, vis-a-vis the Trevoh Chalobah to Como situation, a lot of guys are saying, why aren't we looking at selling Fofana, Badiashile, Disasi, Tosin? The reason for that is because we're not going to sell all of them. We're absolutely not, especially if we're going to be playing 3 at the back. If we're going to be playing 3 at the back, then we're going to need more centre-backs. That's just a given, right? It's just absolutely a given. We're going to have our first teamers, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you're going to need 6 or 7 centre-backs in the squad to facilitate a back 3 for the most part. So the chances of selling 4 centre-backs is probably quite unlikely. So, to bring it back to Liam Delap, as well as Liam Delap, obviously Xabi Alonso is going to want to come in, take a look at Delap, take a look at Tosin, Badiashile, Fofana, and Disasi, potentially, I don't know. But to say, can I work with any of these guys? Or if we're going to sell 2 of these guys, which 2 do I want to keep? Or if we're only going to keep 1, which one are we going to keep? I've been saying it for a while. As much as I would like us to sell all of our centre-backs, clean house and get a load of new ones in. I don't expect it to happen. I don't think this is going to be a window like we've been seeing, where we have these mass exoduses and we bring in 1 million players and just completely restructure the squad. We need to build around our first team and improve our depth, essentially. But we still need depth players at the end of the day. Injuries are going to be a thing. Tiredness is going to be a thing. Bookings and sending offs are probably still going to be a thing. I hope not, but potentially. Rotation is going to be necessary for cup games. If we're looking at getting far into cup competitions, we will have multiple games going on. So it's going to be important for Xabi Alonso to take a look at the likes of Liam Delap and to take a look at the likes of the centre-back situation to see who we actually want to keep around in the first place. Right, and to finish up today, we're going to talk about Cesare Casadei. This one is wild. I don't necessarily rate it. I'm not sure. I looked into it a little bit, but I'm not sure how I feel about this one. Transfer News Live posted this via Tutto Mercato Web. Chelsea are working to bring Cesare Casadei back to Stamford Bridge after his spell with Torino. The Blues are considering a move to re-sign the Italian midfielder as they continue to reshape their squad this summer. Talks are ongoing, with Chelsea retaining control over the player's future. So I think we sold him for quite cheap with a buyback option. So similar to the Nico Paz to Real Madrid situation, right? Casadei at Torino last season scored 7 goals in Serie A with 0 assists. So not a hugely creative midfielder. Maybe like a B version of Enzo Fernandez by the sounds of it. If any more news about him comes out, I'll definitely do a deeper dive in it. But just on the face of it, I'm like, I don't necessarily see us missing a Cesare Casadei in our midfield. I guess the thing is, it might be a market opportunity, or it might be similar to what Real Madrid are doing with Como. 7 goals in Serie A is decent. Maybe it's a case of we buy him back for a cheap buyback clause and then sell him to another club in Serie A, like an Inter Milan or Roma or Juventus or something, for instance, that are looking for a few more goals from their midfield. So like I say, I don't necessarily see the idea of Cesare Casadei coming back into our team. When you think about our current midfield depth, right, and the fact that we're looking at adding Granit Xhaka, there's conversations about Adam Wharton, Caicedo is nailed on. If we're going for a 3 at the back, then we're only going to be actually playing 2 midfielders. So it just feels a bit weird, doesn't it? It's like, Romeo Lavia is a big question mark because of the injuries, but ultimately is a deep-lying distributor. The likes of Dario Basugo and Andre Santos can kind of be support for Moises Caicedo, but I would not be surprised to see one of the 3 of those players get sold or go out on a loan, especially if we're looking at bringing in 2 more midfielders in the shape of Xhaka and hopefully Wharton. I'm trying to manifest the Adam Wharton thing. So just a bit of a crazy one, really. So the only reason I could see us going back in for Cesare Casadei is if it's, like I say, what Real Madrid have just done with Nico Paz at Como, where it's like, we're going to buy him back now so we can sell him to someone else or sell him back to Torino for a higher price. And it might just be like when I say market opportunity, I mean like an opportunity to just make a few extra quid out of him, essentially. Because I remember him being sold. I didn't realise there was a buyback clause, though. He actually threatened to get into the midfield a couple of times over the last few seasons. and obviously did well enough for Torino to come in and be like, we'll have some of that. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's an interesting one. So I'll be interested to see how this develops. Like I say, I don't see him coming in like is he a half space number 10? Like, no, I don't think so. But at the end of the day, 7 goals in Serie A for a Torino player is good. So maybe he's a hot property in Italy, and there's a couple of other teams that like the look of him. But we live in this world now where buyback clauses are more of a thing. And for instance, even Marco Palestra was on loan at Cagliari from Atlanta last season. So he smashed it last season, but he didn't even smash it for his home club. So even though the stats are all Marco Palestra at Cagliari, we've bought him from Atalanta. So this is just becoming more and more commonplace, where footballers become assets at the end of the day, and it's becoming more and more commonplace that the player you see do well and is actually owned by someone else somewhere else. And with us having the multi-club model as well, that's going to be a huge thing, isn't it? Like, chances are we could loan a player to Strasbourg, he does really well there, then another team comes in for him, but they don't even buy him from Strasbourg, they actually buy him from us. So, interesting. Cesare Casadei, what do you guys think? Market opportunity, is there a place for him in the squad? I'm not super convinced. Let me know what you think in the comments. Nice one, guys. We're going to wrap today's video up right there, but I'd love to know everything you think about whatever we've talked about today, starting with Granit Xhaka. I think it's a good idea, man. I think it's a good idea. And if anything, I'm not even necessarily looking at the profile of the player, because the age is obviously a little bit concerning. But at the same time, all the noise is coming out saying Xavi wants him. Xavi wants him for the mentality. It's not all just... And don't get me wrong, I think he did really well in the Premier League last season. Yes, he's a year older, but he's clearly still got something to offer. And because of the style of play as well, he's not running super fast player running around everywhere all the time. Do you know what I mean? So losing his pace isn't necessarily, gonna affect him that much in his game, as long as his passing is really good, because as a deep line distributor, that's what he is. Trevoh Chalobah to Como or Inter Milan, for instance, like, I just think we're gonna see it. I think it's probably the best for Trev at this point. It feels selfish for me as a Chelsea fan to be like, I want Trev to stay and be a backup, and it's like, yeah, that's fair, but at the same time, it's like, as a professional footballer, are you just gonna be like, yeah, I'll play half of the games I played last season and come on as a sub all the time because I love being at Chelsea? Like, unfortunately, I just don't think that's realistic, and I hope if he goes, we get a good amount of money for him and he goes on well to do wherever he is. The Maxence Lacroix deal seems to be part of Chelsea's stealth window, and it's happening quietly behind the scenes, although I imagine the leaks have been coming from the Crystal Palace side. But at the end of the day, Palace aren't keen to sell because they obviously he's done really well for them, and after losing Mark Guehi and stuff, like, they always just lose their best players. But at the same time, Lacroix wants to leave, and if they can get a good amount of money for him to reinvest it in the new manager, that makes sense. Everton preparing a bid for Liam Delap, watch this space. And Cesare Casadei, like I say, the only thing that makes sense to me at the moment is bring him back to sell him on somewhere else to make a little bit more money. But I don't see him, even just the profile of the player that he is, right, I just don't necessarily see him coming in and making a splash in the Premier League. Nice one, guys. Thank you very much for sticking around until the end of the video if you did, and I will catch up with you all very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.